like a physical effort, but the real inner peace, the real connection with Allah Jalla wa Ala subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't seem to be really present in our lives. It feels like we are very far from these true, sincere, genuine emotions. It always feels like we push ourselves, and that's a good thing, that's a strong thing. But there is a difference between being pushed, or rather, between pushing yourself or being drawn near to Allah by Himself. When He draws you near, there is no effort. When you want to come closer, it's like you go against the current. Now you walk and that makes you strong. Now that makes you a true, real life, figuratively speaking, warrior. But when Allah pushes you in that breeze, yani behind you, you know when there is a strong wind and you walk quicker just because of the strength of the wind behind you, that's what the awliya experience. Like even if they don't think like, I want to do something now, something good, they're being pushed. Because they are being used. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, when Allah loves somebody, yani sta'mala. Yani what does that mean? Yani He will use him. Yani He will use him to be that tool through which He shows the people how He wants the Muslim to live, how He wants the Muslim to cry, how He wants the Muslim to feel happy with Jannah, how He wants the Muslim to do all of these things. So and this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, تَعَرَّضُوا لِنَفَحَاتِ اللَّهِ. Expose yourselves to the divine breezes. This is in the Mu'jam of Imam al-Tabarani. He said, expose yourself to the divine breeze. فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ فِي أَيَّامِهِ نَفَحَاتٍ. Yani because in all of the days that exist on this dunya, there are these breezes that go over the face of the earth. And when he was asked alayhi salatu wasalam about these breezes, then he said they come from beneath the arsh. And they are looking for anybody who is looking for Allah at that particular moment. And if that breeze passes you and sees that at that moment you made Allah your goal, then that breeze takes you with it. They compared it to a boat on the ocean, and you open the sails, but there is no wind. Sometimes you remain on sea, there are no waves. Like for 6 days, 7 days, there is nothing. But you still open your sails. Because you say, if the breeze, the wind would pass, then it would take me with it. And that's why they say never give up, because that moment that you expose yourself to nafahatillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala can always come. And not because you're good. Nobody, apart from the prophets, nobody comes to Allah because they managed to become good. It is because He chose them to be good. So the only thing that is left for the servant, and of course, we will not say we don't perform actions, but your inward state is that of a needy person. It's of a poor person who feels that he is in need of Allah, desperately begging, yearning and supplicating from Allah to take him with these nafahat. You see? And this is a hadith hasan. So it's not invented, it's from the Prophet ﷺ. تَعَرَّضُوا لِنَفَحَاتِ اللَّهِ. SubhanAllah. Yani expose yourselves to the divine winds, these breezes that take you to places you never went before. Now, one of these things, they say, one of these most important sails that you can open in order to be taken with these breezes to beautiful places is the recitation of the Quran. And that's why we say again what we said at the very beginning. It is, if the Quran doesn't work, nothing will. You have to put that out of your mind. I'm going to try some sawm. I'm going to try some qiyam. I'm going to try some this, some that. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was very clear about this. When he said, تَعَلَّمْنَا الْإِيمَانِ ثُمَّ تَعَلَّمْنَا الْقُرْآنِ فَمَزْدَدْنَا بِالْقُرْآنِ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا. We first learned Iman. Then we learned Quran. And the only thing that Quran did with us was increase our faith. Because if the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَن تَجْعَلَ الْقُرْآنَ رَبِيعَ قَلْبِي وَنُورَ صَدْرِي وَجَلَاءَ هَمِّي وَذَهَبَ حُزْنِي. There are riwayat مختلفة. But one thing he said, أَن تَجْعَلَ الْقُرْآنَ رَبِيعَ قَلْبِي. That you turn the Quran into the spring of my heart. SubhanAllah. The Quran is the spring of your heart. What is the spring? Spring comes after what? Winter. Make the Quran the spring of my heart. What happens in spring? new scents, new perfumes. The flowers, they open, you see new colors. The birds, they chant in a different way. Make that spring not outside of me. Because what makes you happy is not your outward life. What makes you happy is your inward life. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, when they captivated him, you know the story, I tell it quite often. He said, if you imprison me, I'm in khalwa with my Lord. I'm in solitude with my Lord. Being alone is what I wish. You know that Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, the scholars differ whether he was an Arab or Kurd. An Arab or the people from a Kurd, and they differ about it. It doesn't matter really. But his mother lived far away from him. And he used to write letters to his mother. And he said, my mother, if you knew what my contribution was, now to the deen there where I am, then you would forbid me to come. And that's why I, for the moment, don't come to you, because I know that you would have not allowed me to come if you would have truly understood what I am doing for the moment. So anyway, he said, if you imprison me, khalwa. And if you kick me out of my country, fikra. And he made that fikra, it is, I think, I ponder, I reflect. No. And he said, and if you kill me, shahada. And if you burn my books, ilmi fi sadri. They went mad. So they closed the door on him. Boom. And then he said, ضُرِبَ بَيْنَهُمْ بِسُورٍ لَهُ بَابٍ بَاطِنُهُ فِيهِ الرَّحْمَةُ وَظَاهِرُهُ مِنْ قِبَلِهِ الْعَذَابِ. They slammed the door in his face. And then he mentioned the verse of Surah Al-Hadid. A door, a fence was between them and it had a door. On the inside of the door there was rahmah, referring to him. And on the outside, that is where the azab was coming from. So these scholars, they understood that there is no such a thing as being alone. They all crave for being alone, because alone means you are with Allah. Maybe you don't notice, but when you're alone, then you're away from khalqillah. So this is why they say, إذا كنت مع القرآن كنت مع مالكك. If you are with the Quran, you are with your possessor and your malik, your king. So now let us continue, because the only way that this will work is if your connection with the Quran is the correct one. And if you are really going to look, Shaitan has managed to get the Muslims away from the Book of Allah. If it is not away from reading, then it is away from understanding. If it's not away from understanding, then it's away from practicing. If it's not away from practicing, it is away from feeling. All of these things are happening. And everybody has a share of something. So how are we going to change that? So that the Quran with one verse, we will see today that some of the Salihin, they said, sometimes I would read one verse and I would keep on repeating it from the sun, from Isha until Fajr. Because of the many meanings that are connected to the Quran. So the Imam here will mention, has already mentioned many doors that open the understanding of the Quran, but without any doubt, the first and the foremost after taqwa is Arabiya. The first and the foremost after taqwa, that's the first one. You read the Quran with taqwa, but then it's understanding of the Arabic language. And I am still amazed, and I will not get into the details of the matter, but people telling you just study Arabic for 2 years now. There is a new program, 2 years, and you understand the entire Quran. Ya Rabbi. Do you know, wallahi, I'm not exaggerating. With one of my mashaykh, we study more than 50 tafasir at the same time. 50 tafasir. So you study today, he's going for over maybe 1 page based on 50 tafasir. And if he wants to summarize it and hasn't got a lot of time that day, not less than 10 tafasir. Ever. If you do not understand the Arabic language in detail, you will not benefit from the Quran like you should. And there is no quick fix for the Arabic language. There isn't. And that's why really believe that the way that we attack, figuratively speaking, or tackle the issue, how to learn the Arabic language, is something that we need to investigate again, because it is our language. It's not the language of the Arabs, it's the language of the Muslimin and of the Arabs. Now, not of the Arabs, of course. And if we don't understand this, and this is why Barakallahu Feekum, one of my mashaykh said, my dakatira with whom I've studied, mu'allaqat al-ashr. I mentioned this before. Mu'allaqat al-ashr, I'm not going to say what this is. They are the pinnacle of Arabic language. I used to study that with one of my mashaykh, Abdullah al-Masri. And he said, like, as long as you don't understand the mu'allaqat, you will not understand the linguistic miracle of the Quran. Because it was revealed to people whose level of Arabic was the mu'allaqat. And they were amazed, because none of the Arabs said, I will write something similar. We had Musaylima, but he had mental issues. Nobody, if they could have, wallahi they would have. They are being challenged. فَأْتُوا, come. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِهِ. SubhanAllah. They're invited to come with the same as the Quran. They can't. Who cannot? It would be like you telling Shakespeare, if the Quran would have, and it is not, revealed in English, you tell Shakespeare, come with one verse, and he can't. That are the Arabs. That was the level of their Arabic. Do you see where I'm coming from? So it's not you and me who are being challenged. No. There you go, Shakespeare, come. And he says, sorry, I can't. SubhanAllah, you can't. I mean, did you see what you wrote? He said, no. And they all agreed it was not just the speech of man. That's why some of them said majnoon. يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ. But who is the bashar? Bashar yani nakira, a man, someone. They all agreed that it was an unknown way to speak the Arabic language. They all agreed. So some said bashar, some said majnoon, some they said sha'ir. يَتَرَبَّصُ بِهِ رَيْبَ الْمَنِيَانِ. They would say so many things, but this stands for a thing. In the Arabic language, the more important something is, the more names you give it. Like the lion, a sword, whatever, you know that. So the fact that they didn't agree what it was, but they all agreed that it was not just of a human, is the proof that it was from Allah. Because otherwise everybody would agree. They would say this is فيها عليها ملامح هذا الشاعر, for example. There's the timbre, the stamp of one of the shu'ara. Nobody can. And then subhanAllah, I really had to laugh, but not because I was happy. When the people in Kuwait, many years ago, they published the Furqan. Can you imagine? In Kuwait, Sayyidi, Al-Furqan was taught in some Muslim schools. And it was a new Quran, designed by Arabs. Now, Dr. Salah al-Khalidi, he wrote a refutation and a rad, qawi. So in maybe 400, 500 pages. Anyway, and there was Surah Al-Hubb, Surah Al-Hubb, Surah Isa, of course. So the chapter of love, the chapter of Jesus, the chapter of this, and then it was really copy-paste. They said, we will not use the Quran for this. That was like a lie, like 75% of it was just half ayat, copy, paste, this, that, and it was so bad, like even from a grammatical point of view, it was filled with mistakes. The balagha was terrible. It was like the worst book I had ever read in Arabic. So anyway, if the Quran does, so as I said, there are programs now, 2 years, you understand the Quran. كَذِبٌ عَلَى كَذِبٍ فِي كَذِبٍ. That's not true. Please let us stop destroy this religion. Wallahi, nobody asked you to become a scholar. And if you want to become one, then you tread the path. فَاسْلُكْ سَبِيلَهُ. If you want to become a scholar, then walk the path, tread the path of a scholar. You don't, nobody asked you to talk about the deen. Why are you talking about the deen? Why? I don't hear you talk about aerodynamics, for example. Why? Why? Do you really think deen is easier? It isn't. It is easy to practice, difficult to study. So the Arabic language, there is no way around it. And that's why the colonists, they really ruined our Arabic language. They put all of their efforts to let us talk darija. And I'm not saying darija is bad. But if you speak Darija and not Fusha, you have a problem. And then we start inventing Pepsi with three dots, Pepsi, Caravan, a calf with a dot. And they start inventing even Arabic letters that didn't exist. So now, to cut a very long story short, there are veils between you and understanding the Quran. The biggest veil, apart from taqwa, because somebody with a little taqwa and a little bit of Arabic language, at least the Quran will enlighten his spirit. The Quran will enlighten his ruh and will have a good effect on him. But if after that, it's the Arabic language. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah made it very clear when he said that studying the Arabic language is, according to him, fardu ayn. It is an individual obligation upon every Muslim, because you are being spoken to in the Quran. Ya ayyuhan nas, ya bani Adam, ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. You are being spoken to. So if you say, and nothing is stopping you from studying, but your laziness or your priority list, it doesn't fit your priority list, so I put it on the side. But then nevertheless, regardless of you not wanting to study, you still want to talk about the deen. And that's why I'm going to repeat this over and over again until I die. I always say, what's the meaning of al-mursalati urfa, fal-asifati asfa, al-nashirati nashra, fal-fariqati farqa? What is fal-mulqiyati dhikra, udhran aw nudhra? What is was-safati saffa, fal-zajirati zajra, fal-tariyati dhikra? What am I saying? That's your book. That's your Lord who talks to you while He was not in need of talking to you. And you don't want to make the effort to understand Him? And they say, deen, deen, deen. Maybe if you understand, you don't like it. You will. But imagine, you are standing up for something that you do not understand. So this is why, barakallahu fikum, the Arabic language is one of the first priorities for the Talib al-Ilm. Even if you do nothing else, apart from working, your responsibilities, and you look for a good teacher for 5 years. 5 years of intensive study of the Arabic language. And then you maybe start reading a simple book of tafsir that explains you what the verses mean. And then people with their, these free fighters, these free thinkers, they come here, but why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the Quran so difficult to understand? It's everybody's book. It shouldn't be that complicated. How do you want a book that guides people to eternal happiness and to a perfect life in this world not to be a little bit complicated? It is straightforward, and Allah says, آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. And I'm not pointing towards me, I was pointing towards sudur. It are clear verses in the hearts and minds of the people who were given knowledge. Allah didn't say in the hearts of everybody, في صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. So Allah, whenever He speaks of understanding the Quran, or speaks of sharing the message of the Quran, He always refers to scholars. كونوا ربانيين بما كنتم تعلمون الكتاب وبما كنتم تدرسون. Do you hear this? Be ربانيين, according to Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, like he gave a name to his chapter in his Sahih, the chapter of grand, little knowledge before large knowledge, or easy knowledge before difficult knowledge. He said, he mentioned this verse. So, كونوا ربانيين, be educators. Because of what you learned from the book and because of what you were studying. Because of what you were studying. So whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of passing on the message of the Quran, then we see that He always connected to whom? To scholars. Now people are, and here I am again, are sharing one verse on posts. And maybe the context that this verse needs in order to be understood correctly is left out. It's maybe a verse before it or a verse that comes after it. But it sounds nice. It's a nice design. I like the colors. I like the shades. And there we go. I put it out there and I actually don't know what it says. Do you understand what I mean? And that's why even the word Jahannam, Saqar, Jahim, Hutama is all translated as hell. It's not the same. There is in Arabic language, there are no synonyms. Do you know? There is not a true synonym. That doesn't exist. يعني تغيير في اللفظ تغيير في المعنى. يعني تغيير في اللفظ تغيير في المعنى وزيادة في المبنى زيادة في المعنى. If a word changes, then it comes for because of another reason. Even one letter more in the same word, with the same roots, has another meaning. So fa'il, yastaf'il, yatafa'al, it's not all the same, is it? Even though that the root letters are the same. So in the Arabic language, all the meanings go back to root letters. And if you don't understand the root letters, you don't understand the word. And we fell into the trap of shaitan. He wanted to disconnect you from Allah, to disconnect you from bettering yourself spiritually, religiously, financially, socially, emotionally, mentally. So he took you away from the Quran. But he gave us the feeling that we are all shiny, happy people because we recite the Quran. Oh, Ramadan, I recited the entire Quran, good for you. You had a lot of hasanat, but the problem is, the moment that you go against the message, your hasanat turn into sayyat. So now what is the Imam saying? وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَمَا أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ يَعِظُكُمْ بِهِ. In Surah Al-Baqarah, and remember the ni'mah of your Lord, that because of that which He has descended on you of the book and the hikmah. The hikmah, according to Imam Al-Tabari, is a sunnah. He says, be happy with the ni'mah of Al-Quran and the Sunnah. يَعِذُكُمْ بِهِ. And He warns you and admonishes you through it. لَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ كِتَابًا فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. What does that mean? Try. He descended upon you a book, فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. What does that mean? ذِكْرُكُمْ. حَيَاتُكُمْ. What else? The ulama, they say شَرَفُكُمْ. إذا التزمتم بهذا الكتاب ستسيروا ماذا؟ مذكورين عند الناس. علو الشأن، عالية الشأن. So it means, we have descended upon you a book, فيه ذكركم. If you hold on to this book, you will be remembered for always. So if you want to be remembered, just hold on to the book. And then you see all the ulama that are remembered. Who are they? The majority of them. The people that hold on to Kitabillah wal Hikmah and the Sunnah. They remain. Their names are everywhere. So, فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. In the Quran, by holding on to the Quran, you ensure that you will leave a legacy behind as a ummah. By not holding on to the Quran, this ummah has no legacy. We will just have one person, 2, 3, that leave something behind. People that were idealists in the early 1900s or the 1800s, and they made a difference, some of the scholars, but they didn't change the world. The majority changed the way that the Muslims thought, but they had no impact on the world, like some scholars did in the past. When does that happen? When the entire ummah holds on to the book. But now as a generation of Muslims, what did we leave behind? The problem is that we still think that we need to compete with the West, and we Muslims are also in the West, so it's not a negative thing to be Western or in the West. We still believe that we have to compete within the realms of materialism in order to make a point that we are important as well. Knowing how to make a toothpick doesn't make you important. Now, what makes you important is that you can inject the meanings of the Quran into the veins of this world so that oppression will be stopped and that happiness and love and peace can be spread around the world. That is when you mean something in the world. And the only one who can do that is Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah. This is the book that you have in your hands. But everybody draws a line around himself and his family and his children, wife or husband, that small little line, and that's your world. as long as this is good, then I am happy. كتاب فيه ذكركم. ذكركم مش ذكرك. Not yours. ذكركم. And that's why Allah usually He speaks in plural. O believers, O believers, قوموا لله قانتين واركعوا مع الراكعين. Pray with those who pray, do ruku' with those who do ruku'. Plural. Why? That's the only way forward. Divide and rule has worked, but the opposite works as well. So this is why barakallahu fikum. And فيه ذكركم. Then كذلك يضرب الله للناس أمثالهم. In the Quran Allah gives many examples for mankind. So all of these things, barakallahu fikum, are important. So now he comes to the eighth point. And he says the 8th point for the Quran to change you is التأثر. وهو أن يتأثر قلبه بآثار مختلفة بحسب اختلاف الآيات فيكون له بحسب كل فهم حال. Yani, so meaning he says that the ayat that you read have an effect on you, but you have a ta'thir and yata'athar, you are looking for that effect. What does that mean? What you need to know, barakallahu fikum, is that your brain doesn't make a difference between reality and fiction. No? That is why fiction, when you watch a movie, it plays with your emotions, doesn't it? When you watch a movie, you see somebody jump from a plane, or fall from a cliff, or all of a sudden, I don't know, a clown face, if you're afraid of clowns, whatever. So it will have an effect on you. Some people cry when they see a movie. But all of that is fiction. Fiction, for the moment, does more to your brain, my friend, than the Quran. And in Belgium we say you have to call a cat a cat. Means you have to tell it the way it is. Now you have to call a cat. That's what it is. So your emotions are played by fiction and lie more than by truth. Why? Because you have to change the reason why you read the Quran. If you look at just because you want to tick the boxes, it will do nothing with you. Not nothing, astaghfirullah. You will feel a bit happy, you will feel good in your skin. But that is also how you feel when you go to gym after 3 months. You put on 5 kilos, you go for the gym again, to the gym, go, oh, I'm good again. Oh, I feel good about myself. That's what we want you to do with the Quran. The Quran is literally diving into the only true world. The Quran is walking through the valleys of hell, wandering through and strolling through the gardens of Eden. It is a glimpse at a world that is yet to be created. It is observing and gazing at His majesty. It is connecting to the believers of the past, the future and the present. It is being informed how to protect yourself against the devil and his soldiers. You are opening that book that gets you to know the real world. Does that make sense? That is how you should feel before you read the Quran. So that's a ta'athur. So the ta'athur, we spoke about it last time. The way you read the Quran, you should work on the way you read the Quran. When you read about hell, it's low, it's the hazn. When you read about Jannah, it's a bit higher, it's happy. Now, when you start reading like that, it will eventually have an effect on your brain. It will. So you need now not to read the Quran like you watch a movie. You need to read the Quran like you are exploring that amazing book, which is a doorway to another world. Now, people say, wow, Harry Potter was a real different world. That's how they speak about it, right? Because everything is different. The ghosts, the this, the that, everything moves in a different way, talks in a different way, and people were marveled by it, in 2009 and so forth. Lord of the Rings, oh, a new world, completely different from what we know. The Hobbit, oh, wow, look at it. Beautiful beasts now, wow. And everybody's amazed by everybody and what they see. This is your book. This is your book. So when you open it, you feel that it's special. You know, in the 80s, and I'm not comparing the Quran to it in no way, I'm comparing how we respond to books. In the 80s, there was the never-ending story. That was one of these real fantasy movies where you really got captured. And I was, I don't know how old I was then, maybe 9 or 8. It never left my mind because it was so special. And the effects, if you look at it now, I'm not telling you to do it or not, but now you really see that it's fake, right? But back in the days, it was like amazing. So it never left my mind. Why? When you invest yourself with emotions in something, now it will never leave you. And that's why when you invest yourself emotionally in the Quran, it will never leave you. When you now emotionally dive into the depths of hell, and you are there and you forget about the world, and really you are in that space, and most likely in the evening when you put maybe a scarf over your head, you read it, it's dark, a little candle, and now you say, I'm going to explore a world that my Lord has created that is called Jahannam. That's where I'm journeying today. Do you know what effect this will have on you? But when you just read in Ramadan, I didn't finish my juice today. Stress. You even don't have any dopamine or nothing. It's just stress. And alhamdulillah, I did it. I read my 30th juice today before sunset. Good? I don't know, good. So that's why when you read the Quran, that is how you do it. So you find that space and place where you read what your Lord is describing. So many different worlds. The worlds of Salih, the worlds of Thamud, Ad, the world of Fir'aun and Musa, of David and Solomon, Dawood and Sulaiman, Bilqis, Luqman, you name it. These beautiful stories. And they are not bedtime stories. They are life changers. They are life changers. So when you read it, this is why we say, A'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim before we read. To get away from the perception we have of what the Quran is for us. It's not a book just like that, not just ink on paper. It pierces through time and place. And when you do that, yes. So the ta'athur can only happen when you give yourself time to read the Quran. And we said before, by changing the intonation in your voice whenever you read about something. خلاص. قال الحسن والله ما أصبح اليوم عبد يتلو القرآن يؤمن به إلا كثر حزنه وقل فرحه وكثر بكاؤه وقل ضحكه وكثر نصبه وشغله وقلت راحته وبطالته. بطالته. Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, Wallahi, by Allah I do swear. Yani, if a person, a abd, reads the Quran and believes in it, yani truly believe, not the basic belief, every Muslim has a basic belief, but like really what we spoke about, this is Allah's book, this is His word, and you prepare yourself, right, for that moment where you're going to explore that new world for you. He says, then he will be sad quite often, and he will not laugh as much anymore. How can you laugh when you travel through the valleys of hell? How are you going to laugh? If you truly believe in hell, my friend, and you truly believe, it's so difficult because there's so many layers on our hearts, so many layers in front of our eyes. Like we ended up like the majority of people, I experience and feel what I can see. But in the Quran, it's like the majority is about things we cannot see. So you will not benefit from the Quran unless you trust Allah. Unless you trust Allah. And until you are 100% sure that these words are the words of Allah. And then layer after layer after layer after layer will be taken away from before your eyes, and then, like Ibn Ata'illah rahmatullah azza wa jal said, the unseen world will become clearer to your heart than the seen world is clear to your eyes. And that is where you end up. You read about Jannah, it's too much. Imagine that you feel what you believe in. Like when you read about Jannah, right? Imagine now that you feel it like somebody being told that it really exists. It's a problem that we don't have this. And that was one of my first quests since I embraced Islam almost 30 years ago. It was all about an emotional connection and spiritual transformation. Because for me, the most frightening thing is that we can read about these things and we don't run away in panic. It's not normal. Habibi, it's not normal. It is not normal that Allah tells you, if you do this, I give you Jannah. And you read about the rivers, you read about the trees, you read about Hur al-Ain, you read about all of these things in Jannah, and your heart doesn't start like tuf, 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 like that. If tomorrow somebody comes to you and said, hey, I have a ticket for you to go on Hajj together, we're in a 5-star hotel, 7-star hotel, no, and then we're going places, I bought a car for you, I just put 500,000 pounds on your account just because I like you, I love your smile. But imagine this person you believe, and you know it's true. You didn't see it. How are you going to feel? You're going to be so happy. You're really going to be happy. Where is your happiness? Is the absence of happiness not a reason sufficient to cry? Wallahi, if there is one thing I know I need to cry for, it is because I am not happy enough with the things that Allah shares with me. I'm not happy enough. I say this about myself. I know I want to get there. I hope that one day He will choose me and you. But I know this is not normal. I know that if that happens, I have a problem with my faith. 100%. So he says, when somebody reads the Quran, يعني كثر حزنه, يعني he will be sad more often than he laughs. He will cry more often than he laughs. He will be exhausted and busy more than he is at ease and doing nothing. You can't do nothing when you know that Jannah exists. You can't do nothing. Just me time. What me time? Do you speak about me time when you're imagine you're laying down on the floor, drinking your, I don't know, fresh orange juice, and your boss, and it's like quarter past 10, says, what are you doing? I mean, you should be there, working. Boss, it's me time. We were not created for me time. Me time doesn't mean you cannot rest. We all need rest. Otherwise we get exhausted. But your me time is for a reason. You want me time to serve better. You want me time to serve Him better. So even your me time, you eat because you want to fast, and you sleep because you want to raise at night. You want to pray at night. Your me time, you rest, you go to a spa, a halal spa, whatever. You go to Turkey in a halal hotel, they have that over there. Halal beaches, do that. Just cover your knees and you're okay. And you want to rest, but rest with a reason. Not just me time, it's me. Nothing in this life is me. Everything in this life is He. We were not created for me. We were created for Him. And that's all we have in this life. So, he says, يعني, he's كثر نصبه, and he will be exhausted. He will be exhausted. And then Ibn al-Ward said, نظرنا في هذه الأحاديث والمواعظ فلم نجد شيئا أرق للقلوب ولا أشد استجلابا للحزن من قراءة القرآن وتفهمه وتدبره. In the huzn here, he says there is nothing that we found to be more beneficial to lead towards sadness than the Quran. But what does it mean, sadness? Because Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Madarij al-Salikin, he says sadness has never been encouraged by Allah. So when the people of the soul speak of sadness, they don't mean the sadness how we understand it. Because the Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge against sadness. He would say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika minal ham, gham, hazan. Yani worry about the future, regret of the past, and what? And sadness. La tahinu wa la tahzan. Yani Allah says, do not be sad. So the sadness is, yani subhanallah, they say that it is the experience that something so magnificent is being told, so overwhelming, that your mind cannot grasp. And that you're like in a state of longing, but awe, love, and panic all at the same time when you hear these words. Because your Lord is talking to you. So it's a mixture of emotions. So that's why he says قراءة القرآن فتأثر العبد بالتلاوة أن يصير بصفة الآية المتلوة فعند الوعيد وتقييد المغفرة بالشروط يتضاءل من خيفته كأنه يكاد يموت. And he said, and one of these ways of ta'athur, we would say interacting. It's also interacting, it is feeling, it is experiencing. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ gave something very important. He gave us a method to rewrite up to a certain level our brain, even though that he doesn't call it like that. But the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. Yani being gentle and soft of character only comes by acting like somebody who's gentle and soft, and then it will become yours. So with your body you behave in a way that you would like to become, and if you do that for a sufficient amount of time, it will become you. Does that make sense? It will become you. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ, yani becoming soft is بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. Yani you engage with it, you try it over and over again. And that's the same with all the sifat. الصبر بالتصبر. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا. So there are different ways of doing things. So this is what he's saying here. So what are you going to do? He says, so the engagement with the reading is that when you read about al-adhab, you read about pain, you read about these things, he says, يَتَضَاءَلُ مِنْ خِيفَتِهِ كَأَنَّهُ يَكَادُ يَمُوتُ. And here he said, sorry. Oh no, he speaks about good things. No. He said, when you read about the beautiful promise and about forgiveness, then you submit yourself to Allah and direct yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَأَنَّهُ, this is strange, I have to read it again, sorry. Okay. When he reads about forgiveness and the shurut of forgiveness, the conditions for forgiveness which he may not have, then he directs himself to Allah as if he were to die. Like when you read something in the Quran, Allah says, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Surah Al-Imran. And those who oppress their anger and who excel in doing good. Or وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ, those who oppress their anger, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, and those who forgive the people, and very Allah loves those who do good. When you look at these verses and you know that you do not have these traits, it is your worst day in your life. Because if you don't have these traits, then the love of Allah will not be as strong for you as if you were to have them. Does that make sense? Am I talking too much? Is it okay? Because I see it's hot. Should I give you a break? No? Okay. So, then he said, وَعِنْدَ تَوَسُّعِ وَوَعْدِ الْمَغْفِرَةِ يَسْتَبْشِرُ كَأَنَّهُ يَطِيرُ مِنَ الْفَرَحِ. And when the verse is about forgiveness without conditions, forgiveness are being recited, then it looks like he flies through the skies out of happiness. That's a ta'athur. But how do we create that ta'athur? One way. And they say, غَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَغَضُّ الْقَلْبِ وَكَفُّ اللِّسَانِ. Lowering of the gaze, lowering of the heart, and remaining silent or speaking good. That's the only way. If you want to understand the Quran, you want it to have an effect on you, غَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَغَضُّ الْقَلْبِ. You lower the gaze, not just haram, also with hasad, with ayn, envy, jealousy, whatever. غَضُّ الْقَلْبِ, that you don't want dunya, that you have no hiqt, that you are not jealous, not envious, and so forth. So that, and then what? That you remain silent. They say these three, the better you become at them, the better you will understand the Quran. Because the Quran is not given to people without taqwa, and the taqwa is the taqwa al-qulubi wal-abdan. The taqwa al-lisan is the taqwa of the body, the heart, and the mouth. So, and Allah said, hudan lil-muttaqin. Allah musta'an. And then he says, very important, we spoke about this, and when he reads about the kuffar and then how they attribute a child to Allah then he lowers his voice because he's afraid that his voice will resonate through the universe while saying that Allah has a son. So he's, even when he has to say it, recite it, he's almost in a state of fear. وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا. Remember we said that last time. سُبْحَانَهُ بَلْ لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. That's the jawab. Now we always have su'al and jawab when we read. Su'al, jawab. A question and an answer. Right? So this here, when they say قَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا, he lowers his voice. Or when Allah is angry and says, Ya Bani Adam. So you can either read it with force, because you're reading it from the perspective of the Almighty. It depends on your state. Or you read it with fear. And then you say, Ya Bani Adam. And you're afraid. Allah is saying, Ya Bani Adam, Allah is talking to you. So it all depends. But you need that art of reading the Quran with different intonations. I'm not telling you become Abdul Basit, Abdul Samad. It just means recite while you understand what you recite, and not all in monotune. Now I'm just all the same. It's impossible that everything is the same. Jannah, Nar, forgiveness, being threatened to be thrown into hell, they're not the same. The skies, the trees, the stars, not the same as Abu Lahab, is it? So we should try to engage emotionally, but also with the way that we use our intonations and voice. That's very important according to Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, let us continue to the following point. قال بعض القراء قرأت القرآن على شيخ لي ثم رجعت لأقرأ الثانية فانتهرني وقال جعلت القرآن علي عملا اذهب فاقرأ على الله عز وجل. A person read the entire Quran with a shaykh and he said, can I read it for the second time with you? He said, you're exhausting me. You have read it once with creation, now go and read it with your creator. So you have read it once with creation, and that's what everybody should do. You should read the Quran once with a shaykh. From Fatiha to Nas. He corrects you, details, makharij, sifat, exit points, characteristics of letters, at a basic level, now you're good to go. But it's a sunnah to read with people who have read the Quran with a chain of transmission. Now, that is just a sunnah. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, Ali radiallahu anhu said, like in Musnad of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he said the qira'ah, reading with people, is sunnah muttaba'ah, is a sunnah that was followed by the Sahaba, and those who come after them will do the same thing. So look for somebody, read the Quran from Fatiha to Nas, you're corrected, will take you a year and a half, and now read the Quran with Allah. جعلته علي شغلا قرأته معي الآن اقرأ القرآن مع ربك. Read the Quran with your Lord. Then he says the real recitation of the Quran هو أن يشترك فيه اللسان والعقل والقلب. Now is that your mouth and your mind and your heart are present. خلاص. Then he speaks of a taraqi. Take this one with you. I mentioned it last time and I divided into two categories. He mentions three. Rahmatullahi alayhi. At-taraqi means that you gradually grow and go higher. Now from one thing to another. So he says, وَأَعْنِ بِهِ أَنْ يَتَرَقَّى إِلَىٰ أَنْ يَسْمَعَ الْكَلَامَ مِنَ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ لَا مِنْ نَفْسِهِ. The ultimate goal is that when you read the Quran, that you're listening to what Allah has to say. Remember? Not that you sit and that you say, I'm going to read so that Allah can listen to me. That's just the Hasana reader. It's like some of people are friends with benefits. If you do this for me, I will do that for you. That's it. Like, okay, Rabbi, I will read the Quran, you give me hasanat. What do you think that you're going to take away from this? People who love Allah don't want anything in return. People who love Allah, they think that Him allowing you to be with Him is the biggest gift. Imagine, you can be with Allah, but you want to be rewarded for it. Isn't the reward that you are with Allah? Isn't that the true reward? Like it looks like, okay, Rabbi, I'm with you now, but what is in it for me? But that doesn't work. So he says, how do we get there? He says, أدناها, and the lowest degree of reading the Quran, أن يقدر العبد كأنه يقرأه على الله عز وجل واقفا بين يديه وهو ناظر إليه ومستمع منه. Yani he says that the servant reads and he's in front of Allah and Allah listens to him. That's أدناها. Maybe we don't even have that one. That's the lowest one. It's that you feel that Allah is listening to you. That you feel that Allah is with you. And you read and Allah listens. So that's the first one. الثانية أن يشهد بقلبه كأن الله عز وجل يراه ويخاطبه بألطافه ويناجيه بإنعامه وإحسانه فمقامه الحياء والتعظيم والإصغاء والفهم. يعني, and then the other one يعني, is that he listens to it as it is coming from Allah, and then he feels embarrassed, ashamed, he feels يعني, and so forth. And then he says the third one is that he's so connected to Allah that it is no longer about the words, but that it is about the one that speaks to him. When you love somebody sometimes, you hear them speak, but it's just a joy to hear what they say, but you're so focused on their beauty that you forget what they are actually saying. And then they say, they say, oh sorry, what did you say? And that are the people who are connected to Allah with their hearts and their souls. Which doesn't mean that they don't look into the Quran to understand things or to find guidance, but sometimes they are overwhelmed by the fact that the one who is talking to them is Allah, that they're reading the Quran, they forget that they're reading the Quran, they forget to listen, they forget to do anything. They are just amazed that Allah Jalla wa Ala, that they are in connection with Him. He says, and that's the highest degree. It's ajib. It's ajib. Even the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, when they would sit with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they say we would sit so silently that we looked like people who had birds on their heads, and sometimes birds would literally land on their heads because they were not moving. They were afraid to move when they looked at the Prophet alayhi wasallam. And some of them said, if you were asked me to describe Prophet sallallahu, I could not. Some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they were not able out of awe and shame and subhanAllah, sometimes when you meet pious people, you are afraid that they can look into your soul. Now you meet them. I had a Raqi that taught me Ruqya, rahmatullahi alayhi, two big people, Sheikh Ahmed Sarrukh, and the other one was Haidush. Sheikh Haidush, Ya Rabbi. As I always say, even if you were not possessed, when you looked into his eyes, you were afraid that he would find out that you were possessed. Not like he would look into your eyes and say, that's an x-ray of my soul. I'm not saying the people that hear me, so you mean that people can read minds, that people... Just leave me, you know what I mean. So this is ajib. And now you say, oh, you're exaggerating. Is your Prophet exaggerating, alayhi salam? In the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ is saying, اتقوا فراسة المؤمن فإنه ينظر بنور الله. Watch out for the piercing gaze of the mu'min, because he looks with the light of Allah. Mothers have this as well. Mothers. And they don't need to be mu'minat for this. Mothers. You come home when you were a 6, 7-year-old, what did you do? You said, nothing, mom. Why are you lying? She needs to ask you 2 questions and you tell all your secrets. And sometimes she even feels what you did and where you went. And then you say, did you see me? No, I'm sure you went there. So that is just, that is the mother. Now, people who have taqwa of Allah Jalla wa Ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes when they look at you, it looks like they look into your soul. Sheikh Haidush was one of these people. So some of the people didn't know how to look at the Prophet alayhi salam. لو سألتني أن أصفه لما قدرت. يعني if you were to ask me what he looked like, I wouldn't be able to describe him to you. I wasn't able to look at him. Ajib. So you find this in the books of the Seerah. The books of the Seerah, they mention this. And others, they were able to describe everything. From his hair to his toe. Alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is the thing. When you read, you sometimes just enjoy the fact that when you read the Quran, that you are with Allah. أنا مع عبدي ما تحركت بي شفتاه. Remember, I am with my servant as long as his lips move for my sake. أنا جليس من ذكرني. I am the companion of the one who does dhikr of me. And the Quran is the highest form of dhikr. The Quran is the highest form of dhikr. And this is why Allah called the Quran dhikr. We have descended upon you dhikr. And the dhikr يعني the Quran. Okay. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. العاشر التبري، وأعني به أن يتبرأ من حوله وقوته والالتفات إلى نفسه بعين الرضا والتزكية. I'm all summarizing what he's saying for you, but I'm giving you exactly the message, what, let us say 80% of the message that he's sharing in his book, and then I add to it like 20%. So when he speaks of a tabarri, rahmatullah alayhi, he says, and this is a very difficult one, when you read in the Quran, you read the good traits, now, فإذا تلا آيات الوعد والمدح للصالحين فلا يشهد نفسه عند ذلك بل يشهد الموقنين. Now, so when you read ayat where good traits of people are mentioned, about sabr, about patience, about trust in Allah, good behavior, then you don't see yourself. Then you see the others. Then you see the others. You know what I try to do when I read good sifat in the Quran? I try to look for some of my friends who have this. So for example, I read وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, and the ones who oppress their anger, I stop and I say, who of my friends control their anger? And then I find people. And so the next time when I see them, then the first thing that I experience is Alhamdulillah, the Quran is still being put into practice. That makes you happy. And then you see the beauty of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then next time when you see them, you can thank them. And you tell them, Habibi, when I was reading this verse, and I do not want to praise you, but I was so happy because I saw your reflection in that verse. But if now you read the Quran, and all these good traits, you think of yourself. Like, and those who forgive, subhanAllah, I always forgive. Maybe you did, but just thinking that of yourself is a bit strange. So if you now start seeing these good traits and you recognize yourself in these good traits, it means just that you're blind for your bad traits. And then he says, when you read of the bad traits, you recognize yourself in them. But not up to a level where you start like belittling yourself and looking down upon yourself. That's never healthy. SubhanAllah, the Sufiya of Al-Basra, they used to do this. And they used to say back in the days, Al-Fiqh fil Kufa, Naam, wa Tasawwuf fil Basra. Tasawwuf was a science, right? It was a science that would teach you how to purify your inner self, and that's why Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, in his Fatawa, he also has a chapter of Tasawwuf wal Adab. So I'm not talking about strange sects doing strange things. That would be outside of the realm of Islam, whatever that may mean according to Mujtahideen. So, but apart from that, they would say Tasawwuf is in Basra. These were one of the first books that I would read. When I became Muslim, when I embraced Islam, I would read about the ibadat of the Basriyin, and I felt so bad. Like I read Imam Ahmad rahimahullah azza wa jal, and he was from Baghdad. So they said when he was in a good state before he was punished in jail, then he would, after he left jail, his son says he became weak because he used to pray 300 raka'at and now he only prays 150. And he used to pray 300 extra raka'at per day, and after he got beaten, he had a bump on his back because they had beaten him so severely, he was only capable of praying 150 raka'at. You should imagine, I was like a Muslim for a couple of weeks. I said, 150 raka'at. And then they started talking about people fasting so often that even their wives wouldn't know that they were fasting, and then their wives would give food with them so that they would take it to their jobs, but then they would give it to the fuqara and to the poor people on their way to their job. They would come back, their wife wouldn't have prepared any meal because she said, I made you a lot of food today. So he would go to bed with a glass of water because he didn't want to share his secrets. And they said, well, subhanAllah. Some people, they said, when they would pray in the mosque, they thought it was a pillar because, there were no lights, just candles. So sometimes somebody would stand so still, you would look at him, you thought it was a pillar in the mosque. And then they said, and then when he went, all the entire soil beneath his feet was wet because of crying out for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So that were the books that I was reading in the beginning. I became so discouraged. Like I said, mashallah, I'm happy people like that exist. I said, but I can't do this. Am I bad now? So that was the people of Basra. So we are not of the people who do لوم النفس إلى درجة القنوط. So Allah speaks of nafs al-lawama. The nafs or the ego, the person that criticizes himself and blames himself for the bad he does. We do that, but not up to a level where we despair. Because as our scholars say, when you end up in a well of despair and you think you're nobody and you're good for nothing, you will give up on yourself and then reflect that, and that will be reflected in your worship. You say, I will never be forgiven. Allah will never take me back. This is the 1000th time that I betrayed my promise that I made with Allah. No good for me, and that's spiritual suicide. That's spiritual suicide. It is when you give up on yourself and give up on Allah. And then you end up in a very dark place. So yes, we do a tabarri, we look at these bad traits, and we say like, this represents me at least for a part of it. Because maybe you are very patient. So anyway, so that's the way he says, that one should try to read the Quran, and that's the 10th point and the last point that he made, rahimahullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you have any questions about what has been said? Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Yes. Yes, we would say ta'ayush tajawud. Yes. About what you said? Yes. 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 Look, Sayyidi, so I believe the best guidance is the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So a lot of the people that used to blame themselves and so forth, it is not of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So what I find is that the Prophet ﷺ cuts a long story very short. You've sinned, that was the past. You want to stand up again, get up. How do you get up? If you wronged somebody, you rectify it. If you did something wrong towards Allah Jalla wa Ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, which didn't involve a third party without consent, then what? Then it's just tawbah and you carry on. There is no, people want to feel that pain for a long time, but that's not something that Allah wants. Do you understand? It's just, okay, you made a mistake. You shouldn't feel guilty towards Allah because you didn't even hurt Him, you hurt yourself. And that's why the feeling of guilt, you do not find that. When we speak about sinning towards Allah Jalla wa Ala, it's not about the feeling of guilt. It's a feeling of regret that you missed out on being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's it. So yes, we should observe ourselves. We should, it's a very rational thing. Like, what are my shortcomings? And then you say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, and you start crying in a corner. Will that help you? It won't. It's just you observe yourself, you fix yourself, and then you're good to go. Welcome. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. No. You know, Habibi, what I did in 2003? I designed a course 20 years ago. I was 26 then. And it was about all the good people I had seen in my life. What I try to do, what I do rather, is I observe literally the people, not spy on, observe the people that I encounter, often, frequently, or not as frequently. and then I look at their good traits. I know exactly the people that I've seen often. I've seen you very often. I've seen you very often. Abdullah, Khayyam. For myself, I'm not going to mention this out loud. I don't know all of their good traits, but I know at least 4 to 5 good traits of everybody that I encounter in my life. Why do I need this? Because I don't always want to go back 1,400 years to find good people. Because I believe there is a lot of good in many people. I also believe that people struggle to be good, and struggle to become better because the time we live in is a very difficult one. But that makes their good traits even more so praiseworthy. Because the current that we are swimming against, it's a system. It's a system where people are being taught to live outwardly happy lives and inwardly sad lives. Where it is no longer about quality, but where it's about quantity. Where it is, there's a difference between a happy life, a meaningful life, and whatever kind of life. So this in a pleasant life. So we are being taught to have a pleasant life, not to have a happy life. And a pleasant life is an outwardly pleasant life, but that doesn't always make you happy. So I believe that when you write down literally the traits of everybody you know, wallah, you will start loving the ummah again. Because we can't all represent, no individual can represent all the good traits of Islam. That's impossible. But we as a whole, as a collective, we can. And that's why we need some people in this community who are always there, known for their fajr in the mosque. Somebody else for sadaqat, somebody else for always thinking positive, somebody else for this. And we are going to focus, we are going to put a hold to our bad traits, and we're going to look at what we are best at. And the things you are best at, you carry them since you were small. And if you were guided by your parents, that will become very obvious to yourself and to the people. But it's usually the trait that people mention about you when you are being spoken of. Oh, that's a courageous man. Oh, that's a good father. Oh, that's a nice neighbor. Oh, that's this. And that's what you then become a specialist at doing. And then, subhanAllah, if everybody does this, then we represent the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or that's why Ibrahim alayhi salam was called by Allah, a ummah. Ibrahim, he said, was a ummah. What does it mean, ummah? Why ummah? Ummah means representative of all the good traits. So we as a collective, we should have all the good traits of Islam within our midst, but nobody can represent all of them at once. That's impossible. So write down the traits of the people you know. Wallahi, do it. And even if you think you know, when you start writing, you will know more. So, yeah. Allah. Yes. The scholars said they had 3 readings. One was reading the entire Quran every 40 days. Sheikh Musa Nasr, rahimahullah azawajal, he mentioned aqwal of the tabi'een that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum will not allow 40 days to pass without reciting the entire Quran. And it was not known that one would not do it, all of them. No? So that was the first generation, the second generation. They would recite the entire Quran every 40 days. Not more than, they would not allow more days to pass than 40 days. So that's your recitation. You can also do 30 days, you can do less, more, whatever you want. But that is your monthly recitation. Then you have a yearly one. A yearly one that you recite from the beginning to the year until the end, where you read partially, or where you read the tafsir of the ayat that you are reading. Now, a year, that means about, let us say, to make it easy, 2 pages a day. Now, it's less. Now, 2 pages a day. Yes, you read it, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. You take an easy tafsir next to it, with word clarification, and a bit of tafsir, like tafsir al-Sa'di, tafsir Ibn Kathir. For me, the Mukhtasar of Ibn Kathir, or al-Sabuni, there are many out there. Jalalain is too short. So that's what you read in 1 year. Then you have one for life. And one for life, they say, takes you 30 years. Takes you 30 years. You know, to prepare a tafsir of 1 page, , 1 page, takes approximately, if you want to do it well, 8 hours if you want to teach it. That's approximately 8 hours to understand the grammar, the balagh, the words, the differences, the fiqh, the qira'at, you name it. And then you want to have different styles of tafsir that you all want to gather in order to understand it correctly. Between 6 and 8 hours without exaggerating. That's one page. So that means that you're not going to do that. That's for the mufassir, right? But that is why these people who read in 30 years, they end with writing in tafsir. So they end writing large tafsir, and that is what they have. And that would be the 3 kinds of reciting that you would have. But as you go on, reading every year, your shorter reading, like every 40 days, will be with more depth. And you will now take away new understandings as you read. And this is why Hafidahullah Azza wa Jal, Shaykh al-Daddawi, he said that his grandfather would read very quickly, like, and then I asked him, do you even benefit from it? And then he said, from this verse I benefit this, from that I benefit that. And he would write down everything that went through his mind while reading at that speed. But that's only because he already had a basic understanding in depth rather of the verses that he was reading. Now, somebody else? Does that make sense? Yeah. Shaykhna. Yes. So reciting the Quran without wudu, meaning not touching, reciting, is allowed. Not in state of janaba. Now when somebody is in a state of major impurity, that is haram. And also not a woman during her menses, postnatal bleeding. She would not be allowed. There is a fatwa for the women that study the Quran and are students of the Quran, according to the Maliki madhab, where they would have an exception to the rule when they are afraid to forget the Quran, they're talibat al-Quran, or they teach the Quran tafsir, then they would be exempt from the rule. But as for touching the Quran, all the madahib agree that we don't touch the Quran without wudu. No. Right. Somebody else? No. They differ, Sayyidi. I know what you're going to say. You're going to mention it's about the angels, right? Mm. So the scholars, they differed about mutahharun. No? I'm sorry. No. So, but I don't use this verse as a proof for it. That he mentioned it, but the mutahharun, they mentioned, because Allah mentioned the lawh al-mahfuz and everything, that the mutahharun refers to the angels rather than to the people. But there are other adillah, that shows that we do not touch the Quran, without wudu. No. Anyone? You first, then you. Yes. Yes. I think up to a certain level, if it is within your capacities to study Arabic language, I would. But I would also look for a good translation. And alhamdulillah, you also have tafsir that are translated into the English language, allowing you to understand the Quran with more depth. But I think if you really want to benefit at the highest level of the Quran, then Arabic would be a requirement for that. Yes. A story. There's so many. Read Risal al-Qushayriya. It's translated in English, so you will find a lot of beneficial things. So subhanAllah, just think of Malik ibn Dinar, think of Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, all of these people, they had openings through the Quran. Some people, they were highway robbers and they heard a verse while they were climbing a wall to rob a house. And they heard the verse, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. So he climbed back from the wall and he left, and he became one of the greatest scholars ever. So there are many stories like that. There is even a book that was written, it's called Qatl al-Quran. People that were killed by the Quran. Meaning, yani, because they heard recitation, it was so overwhelming for them that they just died on the spot. So that's about Qatl al-Quran. Next one. Yes. So you are allowed Sayyidi, but they would say, as long as you do not touch the verses itself with your finger, they would not allow that. Yes, yes, yes. So a woman can do dhikr without supplication and so forth, and Quran without hijab. They would say with the Quran it would be ihtiraman la fardan, yani because it's a state of worship. No? So and because of the worship, it would be better to do it with hijab, not the dhikr, not the dua, but the Quran. So they would encourage it, but it would not be haram. Yani, no. Does that make sense? No. Yes. Oh, they're still doing tafsir. As time goes on, and the scholars understand more and more, yani different things from different dimensions. So alhamdulillah, I mean, that's exactly why the Quran is an everlasting book, yani up to a certain level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take the Quran in the world and so forth. So it's a blessing, yani people, and every tafsir is different. And this is why Ibn Arabi rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, وَعَلَمْ أَنَّ عِلْمَ اللَّهِ لَا يَتَقَيَّدُ بِعِلْمِكَ. And know that Allah's knowledge is not restricted by yours. So the tafsir, this is why Imam Sha'rawi rahimahullah said, وَتَفْسِيرُ الْقُرْآنِ was only possible for the Prophet ﷺ. We say it's tafsir al-Quran, an explanation, but in reality, it is not the explanation. Now, it is what the person takes away from it. Does that make sense? So alhamdulillah, he said it is khatarat hawla al-Quran. It are thoughts around the Quran, but the tafsir was only done by the Prophet ﷺ in a literal sense. Allah. Yes. Yes, so if women have questions, how do they let this know? Okay. They're in the back of the mosque. Okay. I didn't know. Okay. Yes. Which one? No, it's from a person today. Yes. I saw it like a couple of days ago. Yes. You look it up, you'll find it. Yeah. Yes. So of what? Of? Okay. So I think it's the most important thing today. Like people keep on emphasizing on the importance of memorization of the Quran, which I do not agree with. Memorizing the Quran is for the talib al-ilm. Memorizing the Quran is for the alim. So it's not obligatory for the people in general. I believe that we are in need of understanding the Quran more than we are in need of memorizing the Quran if we are not scholars. I believe a scholar has to memorize the Quran. So I would say people never studied on their own unless they were scholared, and then they would just read books and so forth. So you need to find people that you can study Quran tafsir with. So at any age really. So the journey of the Quran, I believe, we already mentioned some of the things, but I really believe that sit at the knees of people who do the tafsir of the Quran or explain the Quran, and go slowly but surely and try to turn it into your life. And that's far more important than to have a beautiful voice when you read it or to memorize the entire Quran. It is really about application and understanding. Wallahu a'lam. Yes. Wa alaikum salam. Yes. Yes. Yes, I don't believe it's a good idea to give it has changed some people, of course, but in general, to give a non-Muslim the entire translation of the Quran, because there are many verses that he will not understand. When he reads, for example, and fights the disbelievers and don't take the disbelievers as your allies and do this and that. If they can't put it in a context, then it becomes very strange. So this is why the verses in Mecca, in the first 12 years, they were all about Allah, they were about social issues, they were about heaven and hell, about moral standards and so forth. So I believe that it would be good to give these chapters to the non-Muslims, like Juz Tabaraka and Juz Amma, 29 and 30, would be a very good thing to share with them. Allah. No. Yes. So my scholars would be very angry if we put the Quran on the floor. They would be very angry if we put the Quran below our navel or belly button. We say navel as well? No. So they would literally be very. So we were learned to do like this, and you don't become tired, subhanAllah, when you sit like that. They would not allow us to put the Quran below our feet. Some of my scholars would go so far that if they had a 2-story house, Allah, they would never put the Quran on the first floor, because they would be walking there. We're not saying haram now, but it's qiyasan ala Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, right? When the Prophet stayed in his house, that they stayed all night, he and his wife, in the corner of the house, because they were afraid to walk over the Prophet's head, and said, we don't want to be between you and your Lord. So yeah. So some of my scholars would literally not allow that, to have a first floor and then the Quran beneath your feet. And that was just a respect for the Quran. So even if somebody were to do it, it would not be haram. But I believe that the more you respect the Quran, the more the Quran will give you. No. Somebody else? No? I always like asking questions. Yes. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he spoke about this when he spoke about this in Sayyid al-Qadir. SubhanAllah. I read this in 2006 when I was waiting for the bus, and I never spoke about it again. So when I was reading it in Jordan, when I was waiting for the bus like this, I was reading his words, and I never shared it until now you asked it. So when I was reading it there, Allah wanted me to read it so that I could reply you now. It's ajib, right? So إن في ذلك لذكرى لمن كان له قلب أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. كان له قلب ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. Qalb means that you have a pure heart. So the only people with pure hearts will take away from the Quran. Alqa as-sama' is that you listen to what is being said. So you have the pure heart, which is the receptor. You have the sama', which is the channel. Naam. Wa huwa shaheed is that you have the understanding. كأنك تشهد معناه أمامك. Now, so that you see the meanings of the words as if they are played in front of you, because you have a deep understanding of the Quran. So it means pure heart, listening attentively to the meanings, but understanding the meanings by looking into the meanings of tafsir and so forth. And if you do these 3 things, then Allah will give you this greater understanding of the Quran. فكلما ازددت في هذه الصفات الثلاث كلما ازددت للقرآن فهما. Yes. Yes, dead heart. The Prophet ﷺ said somebody who has no Quran in his heart is like a ruined house. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكره كمثل الحي والميت. The one who does dhikr of his Lord, and the most elevated dhikr is the Quran. The one who does no dhikr of his Lord compared to the one who does is like the living and the dead. So the less you read Quran, the more you will spiritually die. That's definitely an effect. No. Listening is not like reading yourself, but listening is also from the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ would ask his Sahaba to recite the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also says, when the Quran is read, فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, and to attentively listen. So listening as well, but reciting yourself is a very good thing. No. Yes. Labas. So the thing is, if two people talk to each other while you're driving the car and the Quran is just in the background, many of my scholars will not allow this. I sat with one of my scholars, Sheikh Abdul Hamid, he was a Muslim. And people were doing that, he said, stop here, and he got out of the car. You know, he wanted to make a point, right? And they said, why? He said, how can you interrupt Allah when He speaks? You know, it's really like that, right? So he said, stop. He said, I cannot stay in this car. And then we promised him, and we had to swear by Allah that we will never do it again. And he got in the car. This was one of my mashaykh at the very beginning, Sayyidi, when I was in Holland. Before Jordan and after Sudan. I stayed with him in his house. He told me to memorize the Jami of Imam Suyuti, that was him. He would literally read Quran while he was asleep. Wallahi, he would, until he fell asleep, he recited Quran, and then in his dream, he would just keep on reciting Quran all night long. So he slept while reciting, and I was awake. So I said, can I please sleep in the sofa? Not because I didn't like to listen to the Quran, but I just couldn't sleep. So that was him. SubhanAllah, when he spoke about Allah, his face turned white, pale. And so he would always, when he would teach people, he would always start with the adab of talib al-ilm. Always. And books that teach how a talib al-ilm should behave. He had night prayers, he had siyam. His eyes were always dark because of crying a lot out of fear for Allah Jalla wa Ala. So I had the blessing to be with him, and to sit with him and learn from him. No. No. SubhanAllah. Yes. Yes. That's a very big question. It's a very difficult question, Sayyidi. I actually elaborate on this quite often, what the way of Talib al-Ilm should be. Just to do tasheeh and tad'if of that hadith, Sayyidi, you need like 20 to 25 years. It's not just like I read a book and I know how to do it. So I think both are as important. Ulum al-Quran and Ulum al-Hadith, fiqh, aqidah, they are all important. So, but as for a process, it's a bit too difficult to reply to that right now. Michael? No. Yes. How do you revive your heart? The Prophet ﷺ said in the Mu'jam of Imam al-Tabarani, in the Mustadrak of al-Hakim, the Prophet ﷺ said, إن الإيمان لا يخلق في جوف أحدكم كما يخلق الثوب فاسألوا الله أن يجدد الإيمان في قلوبكم. And Mu'jam al-Tabarani, Mustadrak al-Hakim. Your Iman wears out in your hearts like your garments wear out. So ask Allah to renew your faith in your hearts. And they said, how ya Rasulullah? He said, say often, La ilaha illallah. So this is a direct cure and remedy from the Prophet ﷺ. When you see that your iman is weakened, you say a lot, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. You keep on saying it, and then subhanAllah, it's like it washes your heart. Because even if you do not say it with presence of mind, the word on itself is so strong that it changed the world. La ilaha illallah changed the world, so it can definitely change yours. So La ilaha illallah is the best remedy, direct from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Okay, the one before last, yes. Yes, a woman can perform dhikr without hijab, it's no problem. Yes. Yes, we will recite the Quran in Jannah saying, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when we enter paradise, it will be said, اقرأ ورتل كما كنت ترتل في الدنيا فإن آخر منزلتك يعني عند آخر آية تقرأها فإن منزلتك يعني so read, he said, like when you enter into Jannah, you will be told, recite the Quran like you used to recite in dunya, and your degree in Jannah will be in equivalence to the last verse that you recite. Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah says in his sharh of this hadith, yani, and in Jannah there will be no masahif. That means you will only recite in Jannah what you know by heart. And this is why Al-Hasan al-Basri said, so the Hafiz al-Quran fi a'la darajat al-Jannah. هذا إن صحت نيته. So the Hafiz al-Quran is in the highest degree of Jannah if his intention is correct. And Al-Hasan al-Basri also said, and وأفادني هذا يعني السلسلة صحيحة لشيخ الألباني رحمة الله عليه, that Al-Hasan al-Basri said, and what we take away from this is that there are as many levels in Jannah as there are ayat in the Quran. Sahib al-Quran. Memorization. That's a very complicated matter to which I will give a very simple answer in the future, inshallah. Habibi, la Habibi. Yes, salam. How long are your shorts? You should know that as for the knee, the scholars differed about the knee itself being awra or not. They say they added the knee in order to protect the awra, meaning that the fakhid, the thigh, is awra. So if I would have my trousers right above my knee and I would move, you would see my awra. So this is why they added the knee itself as well. So if you have a short and you pray and it comes above your knee or your knee is visible, then you should first hide your knee, or you should hide that which you can't see before you pray, even if you pray too late. What I would say, you can wrap something around you, whatever it may be, but we can't pray when our awra mukhaffafa, or the awra of the salah is being shown. As long as it doesn't show the awra of your rear, because then that would be okay. Even if it looks a bit strange, because we should try to beautify ourselves for every prayer. But if that is the only way to do it, then you can do it. As long as no other part of your awra would show. That's question one. Your brother wants to ask the second question? Or? Yes. Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes, 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 exactly. So if somebody is an MMA fighter, for example, and now everybody says is MMA even halal, I'm just saying if you would be, then you should cover that as well. Yeah. This is the last question. That's you. You didn't ask a question yet, right? Yeah, the last one for today. Yes. Yes. Look, okay, I'm going to first give you the counter side, right? So we said the people who memorize the Quran are in the highest levels of Jannah, but they can also be in the deepest valleys of hell. The Prophet ﷺ said, like in the Sahih, via Muawiyah, via Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said that the first one with whom hellfire will be ignited is the Qari, is the scholar, and in riwayah, after that comes the one that used to recite the Quran. Some say Qari al-Quran, and the one that was a master of the Quran. Why? Because their niyyah was not sahih. So if your niyyah is upright, then memorizing the Quran is the best thing you can do. If your niyyah is not upright, it is one of the most dangerous things you can do. So it's for you to know. Now, that was last one, but yalla khalas. Yes. No, it is really the front, your navel, but no. That which is the rear itself is awrah. Yes. Yeah. No. I have to stop, otherwise we will keep on going. With questions, usually people after half an hour they find like the energy to ask more. And that's usually when you are tired already. I want to ask you a last question just because, mashallah, you smile so often. Yalla.